Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carrot Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2002 psychological thriller movie titled Phone Booth. Now, Phone Booth runs for 1 hour and 21 minutes long. It is directed by Joel Schumacher. The script was written by Larry Cohen. It is produced by Jill Netter and David Zucker. It is composed by Harry Gregson Williams, the cinematography by Matthew Libatic, and it was edited by Mark Stevens. And the stars of the movie are Colin Farrell, Keifer Sutherland, Forrest Whitaker, Katie Holmes, Radha Mitchell, Paula Jai Parker, Tia Texada, John Enos III, Richard T. Jones, Keith Nobbs, Josh Pais, Ben Foster, and Jared Leto, who had a scene but was cut during the final product. In many ways, Phone Booth kind of feels like it came from the pages of a modern day Aesop tale. There's a lesson to be learned. All the whole execution is executed in a very dark and disturbing way. The story is about a quick-witted, obnoxious publicist who goes by the name of Stu Shepard, played by Colin Farrell, who's from New York City, who makes his way to the very last phone booth in the Big Apple. Now, most of the time he often has been seen, on his cell phone, doing all kinds of shady dealings, scamming people. He's obnoxious with the people around him. He's pretty much a very unlikable individual. He's a big ass passive aggressive, quick witted jerk who doesn't seem to get along with anyone. He pretty much mostly just, as a publicist, what he does is he basically just scams people. Cons them into, like organizing some kind of party organizations and things like that. Of course, all of this is all just one big giant hoax. Everything about him is superficial. He really, you may think of him as some big shot, successful individual who seems like he's got the world in the palm of his hands, when really everything about him is all a shambles. He really isn't, he really isn't who he thinks he is. The only time he's ever not on his cell phone is when he's talking to his secret mistress. Oh, by the way, he's also a married man, too. But he also has a mistress by his side. But he never uses his cell phone to speak to his mistress. No. He usually does his talkings over a payphone. AKA the very last payphone in New York City. Well, actually, this goes to show you that this movie really was ahead of its time. Since New York City doesn't have any more payphones. I mean, last year, I think it was around May of 2022, the last payphone in New York City was destroyed. I don't know if any other cities still have payphones, even though payphones are pretty much a dying breed since everybody all has a phone with them. And you could just make your phone calls on there. You don't have to stick a loony or a toonie inside the payphone. So therefore, so this movie really was ahead of its time. Even though this movie came out in 2002, but was actually originally came out in 2003 because of a delay due to the Washington, D.C. sniper attacks. So this movie was kind of like pushed back. And it only came out, a few months later. Even though it was made in 2002, it is declared a 2002 movie, even though it didn't officially get released until 2003. So, of course, he makes his way to the very last payphone in the Big Apple, but unbeknownst to him, he gets a call from a mysterious sniper who hardly shows his face but seems to know every detail about Stu. And if he makes one wrong move, he has no hesitation to kill him. And if he doesn't do everything that he is told, knocking him down isn't going to mean much to him. He's done it before, and he could very well do it again. Now, Stu's offenses seem to be a little bit more tamed than some of the other previous people who got knocked down by the sniper. One of them was a guy who was doing underage pornography, who felt that his actions were beyond repair, so he took him out. And then there was another guy who was into shady dealings and felt that his compromises were irreparable, so he took him out too. But in Stu's case, he's not really going to just take him out right away. He's just going to jerk around with him. Jerk around with his mind to the point where if he doesn't revive himself, then all hats are off. Then the hat comes off. The sniper has an instinct way very similar to God, and heavily demands the publicist to come clean about his simple ways, or he will pay with his life. You can think about this as kind of like some form of confessions. But instead of, going to a church, going to a confession to unleash and unravel all your sins and all your misdemeanors and all the bad things that you've done in hopes for redemption and salvation, well, instead of taking place in a confession booth in a church, we're looking at a phone booth in the middle of the biggest city in the United States. And he could either be redeemed or he could be dead. It's not the sniper's choice, it's Stu's choice. We don't really know the name of the sniper because you never see his face until the end. We do know that it is Keifer Sutherland's voice because his voice just stands out amongst the crowd. I think it would have made more effective sense if they would have had somebody who could change their voice or make their voice somewhat unknown. But come on now. You guys can't fool me that it isn't Keifer Sutherland. I mean, at the time, Keifer Sutherland was pretty much of a hot ticket, with his 21 series, which is really good. So, like I said, his name is of course Stu Shepard, and he's roaming the streets, manipulating people through his life, chatting away in his cell phone, while consistently chastising his assistant named Adam. What motivated this man to turn off his phone and make his way to a public phone booth? Well, simply, of course, it was because if his wife finds out that that he has a secret mistress by his side, she will look into his phone booth. She will look into his cell phone, and he doesn't want that to happen. So, Stu arbitrarily picks up the phone, like when the phone starts ringing, and he arbitrarily picks it up like any normal person would do. If a public phone is ringing in a phone booth, anybody will be able to likely pick it up. The voice on the other line comes across as both scary, brilliant minded, and diabolically manipulative with zero remorse in his threatening demeanor. Ah, that's our Keifer Sutherland for you, especially when he's in those kind of roles. In the next hour of an 80-minute film, Stu tries to do anything possible to avoid the caller from pulling the trigger, which he says no problem doing. With the image of a stalker who seems to somewhat keep tabs of him, the caller knows each and every move, each and every call that Stu has made, and even in the now, when he rudely belittled a pizza delivery guy, which kind of seemed kind of strange. I mean, pizza delivery people don't go to phone booths. And Stu also finds this to be fucking weird. Like, who the hell is this pizza delivery guy? Why is a pizza being delivered at a phone booth? And who knows what he put in there? Who knows what shit was inside that pizza? Anyhow, Stu, of course, refuses him, kind of like pretty much brushes him off, tells him to fuck off, give it to the homeless if you have to, and things like that. Now, of course, a lot of the other people around the area also want the phone. But Stu, of course, refuses to hang up the phone because obviously, if he hangs up the phone, he's dead. While this caller is just playing games with his mind, you know, brain jerking him. You know, being threatening and scary and deviant. The caller thinks Stu is nothing more than just a pathetic basket case who will never change, and that killing him won't mean much of anything unless Stu can prove him wrong. And while this whole thing happening, you could see the stress, you could feel the intensity, you could feel that this what appeared to be a big shot Mr. Snazzy Pants in the purple gear is nothing more than just a weak, pathetic little urchin who really never doesn't have much going for him, except acting like he's a big time successful bigwig when he's nothing more than just a weak, pathetic little urchin. So Stu, of course, is trying to do everything he can to come clean and to confess with all the people around him, all the people who he has mistreated, including his loving wife, and even trying to come clean with his mistress, telling her that she deserves better, and telling Adam that I'm not a type of guy who should be worshipped but condemned. I mean, he's doing everything in his ways possible to redeem himself. Now, of course, he's spending long periods of time in a phone booth while other people around him want to use the phone. I mean, the phone is located not far from a brothel, and a few whores tend to want to come over to the phone to make their phone calls. But Stu is not letting them use the phone because, of course, if he hangs up, he's dead. He tries to tell these whores to go fuck off. And of course, they're not just going to take this sitting down. So then they bring in their pimp. And he's he's also, like trying to get Stu to get off the phone. But Stu, of course, is not letting them do it. And the sniper from out of nowhere starts shooting at Leon and his whores, which of course leads to the police coming around. And this is, of course, where Forrest Whitaker's character of Captain Raimi comes in. At first, they think that it was Stu who killed Leon and his whores. But of course, you realize that it wasn't Stu, and that Stu has been on the phone the whole time. And Stu, tries to come clean with Captain Raimi, played by Forrest Whitaker, that that this is not me. I didn't do it. So then Captain Raimi tries to, either comfort and reassure Stu, because at first they think Stu was the one who killed these individuals, but it really wasn't. So then they know that there's something legitimately wrong going on. And, this is where Stu starts to, confess, admit his wrongdoings, in hopes that he will be spared. The ending, of course, sees Stu pretty much almost like, I believe that the sniper does try to take a shot at him, but I think it was just a BB gun that stunned him. Stu eventually does get carried away in an ambulance, either from exhaustion, maybe a little bit of mentally drained, but I think he turned out alright. And the end result was that the scapegoat behind the sniper's killing was the pizza delivery guy, which I found to be kind of strange that in the end it was the pizza delivery guy who was taken to the morgue. Stu was eventually carried off by an ambulance because of trauma, I guess, or because of the experience that he had went through. Maybe there might have been some form of injury of some sort, but I think Stu will likely pull through. Nobody likes a rhymer, I know that. So the movie actually identifies itself as a morality play. And it was cleverly written by Larry Cohen, who, believe it or not, had this script lying on the cutting room floor, dating all the way back to the 1960s. And he actually handed the script to Alfred Hitchcock to direct during the time when phone booths were practically everywhere and morality stories were very frequent. In some ways, this psychological thriller can feel a bit like a Hitchcock story. But Hitchcock just really didn't know how to go about with this whole idea of a guy being threatened his life unless he confessed through the confines of a phone booth. I think this movie really, really, truly felt Hitchcockian. If the script of the movie was written in a more modern sense, Stu would have been passed off as a hero. And even though he's not conventionally a villain, he's just a man who needs to become a better person, even if it means life or death for him. I don't think. I mean, if there is a villain in the story, it's the sniper. But Stu is not exactly particularly a likable individual either. He has done a lot of heinous acts, deviant stuff. Maybe it's a little less than the other previous two victims that the sniper has killed in the past. But still, Stu is in need of redemption. And this guy is just gonna circle jerk around him, playing mind games with him, till he finally confesses. Even if it means people around him either growing hostile and, you know, I mean, hell, I was even quite surprised that the two female characters in his life, Pam and Kelly, played by respectively Katie Holmes and Radha Mitchell, also seemed to generate some sympathy. I mean, when Stu comes clean, I thought Radha would be like, she would tell him to simply fuck off and hang up the phone, but no. She actually forgives him. When it comes to him confessing to Pam that she deserves better, she still somehow stays by his side. Even though he hasn't been a very honest man. So, it's all about coming clean in hopes to change your ways to become better. There's always room for change. And I think Stu is learning from this. Hopefully, he will learn his ways and become a better person than he has been before. This movie is definitely contrary to the 2003 film People I Know, in which Al Pacino stars as a con man who tries to do right by revealing his sins. Now, this is actually the second time that Joel Schumacher has collaborated with Colin Farrell. The first was being Tigerland from 2000, in which Farrell plays a recruit who becomes too smart for his own good and finds himself in more trouble than he expected. Here we see Farrell in a similar situation, though living in a more civilized atmosphere. Farrell is in position of a win or death, as this dreaded phone call will determine his fate. But Farrell definitely shows strong stamina through this difficult ordeal and outperforms himself, showing fear, isolation, and intensity throughout. I bet you filming this movie inside a phone booth really would put a lot of strain even to the actor. I don't envy Farrell. I mean, this movie was shot in 10 days. So this really goes to show you just how shoestring budget this movie was. But can you imagine even spending 6-7 hours in a phone booth. It just feels like you almost say to yourself, how did I get into this fucking business? I could have did something else. Instead, I'm standing in a phone booth for long hours trying to get my takes done. And I hope that between breaks, between scenes, he does get some treatment like food or things like that, so that it doesn't feel as bad. I mean, I thought the concept was kind of original, albeit obsolete, that the movie is set in a phone booth, which has become a dying apparatus. Like I said, Stu does gain some support from Detective Ramy, played by Forrest Whitaker, who's experienced these kind of hostile situations before. At first, he's thinking that the sudden death of a pimp was his doing, only to realize it was someone else. Though their communication has to be, for the most part, non-verbal, so that the sniper doesn't know what's happening. The release of Phone Booth pretty much came at ill timing. Originally, it was released at the Toronto Film Festival, and sooner it was greenlit to the theaters, only to be pulled away after the events of the Beltway snipers incident in Washington, D.C. And though Schumacher has made huge blockbuster films, which of course killed a franchise like the Batman films, he can still handle films on a lower budget scale like Phone Booth, which was like only shot in 10 days. Now, Schumacher and Keifer Sutherland have collaborated 4 times before, and definitely Keifer Sutherland was so eerie as the voice of the sniper. The other 3 films that Keifer Sutherland starred under Schumacher's direction include The Lost Boys from the late 80s, Flatliners from 1990, and A Time to Kill from the mid to late 90s. It's effective that the right tone of voice was utilized to great effect on a narrative, because without the right kind of voice, the movie would have likely failed. His motives work nicely to Stu in a way that's both clever, humorless, manipulative, and most of all, unsettling. Almost like the Hans Gruber character in the Die Hard movie, maybe even more scary. Because let's face it, Keifer Sutherland is one scary dude when playing these kind of roles. So I would say I would highly recommend this movie. It's original. It's a one-of-a-kind psychological thriller. I'm not going to say it's the greatest movie that has ever been made, but it does work to an effective level where it would create a lot of intensity, frightening, but also it's a tale of morality that teaches, the valuable lessons of always staying honest with the people around you. So I would highly recommend it in that facet. And if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would give Phone Booth from 2002 a 7 out of 10. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules: be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Correct Writer saying keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.